Reserves the balance of his time. The gentleman from Texas.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized for as much time as he may consume.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I support American workers and families, and that's why I must oppose the legislation before us that would heap another $18 billion onto the dangerous deficits this Congress has already amassed, and that American workers ultimately will be forced to pay for in the coming years. On this tax day, an overburdened nation staggering under dangerous deficits, we need to send this bill back to the drawing board and return with legislation that's paid for, that will not create more debt, and that will help create jobs instead of economic uncertainty and ultimately more job losses. The legislation before us would extend for another 2 months special federal spending programs that today allow unemployed workers to collect up to 99 weeks of benefits in most states. That's nearly 2 years of unemployment checks today, which are by far an all-time U.S. record. That compares with a total of up to 26 weeks of unemployment benefits payable in almost all states during normal times. We all want to help unemployed workers who are frustrated by the White House, who has taken their eye off the economic ball. They're frustrated by this Congress that has sought an extreme agenda rather than focusing on jobs. But it is impossible to ignore the fact that those extra 73 weeks of federal benefits paid today, a full 17 months courtesy of federal taxpayers, come at an enormous price. In all, this bill would add $18 billion. That is the size of the entire NASA budget. Add that to this year's $1 trillion deficit, including $13 billion more for the unemployment benefits it would extend. That is on top of the approximately $100 billion spent so far on these programs, and if extended for the remainder of this year, as we expect, another $50 billion more would be added to the national debt. None of this has or will be paid for. In fact, the federal unemployment account has long since been bankrupted. Yet we continue to spend, and now are being bailed out with general revenues. And who will bail out general revenues when they run out? Taxpayers, through more taxes and more general revenues the government extracts from them. So far, in the past year and 1 month, 2 months since the President has been in office, taxpayers are paying $2,100 more per individual because of $670 billion in new tax increases. And if President Obama's budget is approved by the Democratic Congress, we will heap almost $3 trillion more on American taxpayers. And what's sad, again, is that we continue to heap debt without any opportunity, without any promise that is kept to pay for them. When our Democrat friends took office, they promised they would pay for the wars, pay for the Iraq and Afghanistan war, but not a dime yet. They promised they would balance the budget. Today we see trillion-dollar deficits as far as the eye can see. They enacted PAYGO and said we're going to pay for all new spending, but as this bill today shows, they've done nothing of that. And in fact, have invented extravagant loopholes, declared anything an emergency simply as an excuse to continue spending. And of course, they promised to curb earmarks. In fact, eliminating earmarks could nearly pay for this bill, but they've not kept that promise either. Mr. Speaker, we can do better than this. What unemployed workers really want are jobs and paychecks, not almost 2 years of unemployment checks and more massive debt for our country. Unfortunately, jobs are something Democrats in this Congress has been totally incapable of delivering. Instead of creating 3.7 million jobs as promised, their stimulus bill was followed by 3 million more job losses. Instead of holding unemployment under 8% as promised, it soared to nearly 10% and remains close to that today. 16 million Americans are unemployed, including record numbers for over a year. In fact, the White House promised if you pass the stimulus, 90% of the new jobs we create will be in the private sector. The opposite is true. The private sector has lost 3.7 million jobs, but government jobs have been created almost 300,000. So the people who are getting these unemployment benefits are the ones whose promises have not been kept by this White House and this Democrat Congress. We need to start over and actually start paying for new spending starting with this bill. The only way to do that is to defeat this bill and bring it back in a paid-for fashion. But beyond that, Mr. Speaker, we also need to do the things that really help create jobs for unemployed workers. We can start by stopping frightening the job creators. Businesses who are delaying important rehiring decisions and investment decisions, frightened by all the new taxes proposed in Congress, the new health care mandates, the rising energy taxes, the talk of new regulation. We have to stop frightening consumers who know that ultimately they'll be relied upon to pay this terrible debt. We need to reward innovation and small business job creation through lower taxes and support for innovation. And we need to pursue free trade agreements that find new customers for American workers and American companies. That is why, Mr. Speaker, we must send this bill back. Make it paid for. Stop punishing American workers and family. I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Texas reserves the balance of his time. The gentleman from Michigan.